Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into it, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half. Shall we? Tonight's first encounter. I want to preface this by saying that my grandparents' land is 75 acres of horror in southeastern Arkansas. I grew up there, so all of the craziness really didn't affect me. So if my reactions are odd, it's because this is my life and I'm kind of desensitized. No, this is not the only thing to chase after me in my car, but this one was different. Anyway, I was 17 years old, driving from my dad's house on the before-mentioned land. Pretty late, I think it was around 11 p.m. or so. I dropped someone off at my dad's house and was driving back into town to get back to my mom's house. As I'm driving down our long driveway, I kept seeing things move in the field. I didn't pay any attention, probably a rabbit or something. Things moving in the grass are normal. I get out to the road and I see something/someone in the ditch, just lying there. Me, being a girl in a raggedy old car at a place with poor cell signal, in the middle of the night, with no weapon on me, I floor it. I don't care. I figured I'd call my dad later to take care of a possible drunk in the ditch. I'm driving down the road, the memory of the ditch person creeping me out. I'm getting this awful feeling of being watched. I'm traveling down this road nearly 60 miles an hour with no signal whatsoever. Okay, maybe I'm just overreacting. Whatever. I still sped up because I want to get a cell signal and call my boyfriend to make me feel safer. Then I see something running alongside my car. Well, I say running, it's more like skittering, lanky limbs on all fours, running and keeping up with me, going 60 miles an hour on a country logging highway. I think my brain kind of had an aneurysm at this point because I'm just repeating to myself, what the F? I'm going closer to civilization though, so I floor it, getting up to 80 and leaving it behind. I called my boyfriend, freaking out about what I had seen. I pulled over at a little church with a light out in front, trying to make logic out of it. When I see this thing again, it's on the road skittering toward my parked car. Before I have time to pull out of the lot, it's on me, hitting my car hard enough to dent the rear bumper. I scream, squeal out of the lot, and drive like a maniac towards town. I get to town and circle around the main streets a few times, calming down before I go to my mom's house. Further description of this thing, it was weirdly flat, like someone trying to backbend but not bending. Its limbs were long and spindly, with pale skin stretched too tight across its bones. Tonight's second encounter. We had traveled up near the Canadian border in St. Louis County, Minnesota, a few summers ago. We rented a cabin off the grid in the middle of nowhere. My son is severely disabled, and while he is nonverbal, he is definitely not quiet. He makes very loud sounds, guttural shrieks and whoops. This particular spot takes about an hour off-road to get to. It's near logging roads, but there are no people, very rugged roads. The cabin is on 320 acres of lake and surrounded by well over 40 acres of forest. It's just us there. Plenty more acreage, but that's just the acreage around the cabin. That night my son was standing on the deck. It was on the second level of the cabin. He was jumping and bashing and howling. The pounding of his jumping on the deck was reverberating throughout the forest. This was something we would usually worry about, but not here. It felt great not having to worry. This is the very reason why we were here. No one to judge us or get upset by our sounds. Off to the west, we began hearing something. It sounded as if it was mimicking my son. It just didn't feel real at first. It was so no way this is happening moment. It mimicked him unbelievably well. It was loud and sounded as though it had a lung capacity of 20 men. It was definitely an animal. It didn't sound angry at all or menacing. It was just a strong mimicking sound. I don't really know how to explain it. We went inside and did our best and tried to ignore it. I felt the entire rest of that trip as if we were being watched. I couldn't shake that feeling. It was the most uncomfortable I have ever felt in my life. I cannot explain it. Just thinking about it now makes me very uncomfortable. There were other very odd things that occurred that week, but I really don't feel comfortable sharing. Almost supernatural. I know that sounds silly, smoke alarms going off at night, etc., just weird things. We ended up going back the next summer as we didn't let on to our other son, who was asleep at the time, that anything had occurred. We had no incidents like that again, no feeling of being watched and nothing uncomfortable, but that incident that week will always stay with me. And tonight's third encounter. At the time, I didn't really know what was going on. I just had the impression that the woods outside of my house were very creepy. I only recently decided that I thought it was a Bigfoot, after doing a lot of research and seeing a lot of similarities between my own experiences and other people who have had encounters. My family started building a house in rural South Georgia when I was 12 years old, and we moved in once it was finished a few months after I turned 13. It was a few miles outside of the town we lived in, a plantation town on the Florida-Georgia border. We lived there until I graduated from high school in 2013. This first thing I don't actually remember happening, but my dad told me about it a few months ago. Apparently, the first night my family slept in the new house, none of the windows had curtains or blinds yet. I came into my parents' bedroom and asked to sleep with them. I did this a lot as a little kid, but it was pretty unusual at the time I was 13. My dad said that I told him I saw a face looking into the window at me, and it scared me very badly. The rest of this I remember quite vividly. One time my sister and I were jumping on the trampoline in our backyard when all of a sudden we heard something whistling at us, and it came from the side of the house near the garage. I can't explain exactly why it's so terrifying, but it scared the crap out of us. We jumped off the trampoline, sprinted inside, and slammed the door behind us. It was just so weird because we had already met the neighbors at that point. We didn't have many, and it did not make sense that they would hide from us and whistle. They would have just walked up to us, plus we hadn't seen any people approaching. My sister later told me that she had seen something hiding behind a trash can next to the house that I didn't see. She doesn't remember the whistling part, but I swear I'll never forget it. It was so bizarre. I think that she might have seen something and remembered that, while I only remember what I heard. Sometimes I think that I remember seeing a dog or something run to the side of the house from the woods super fast. Like unbelievably fast, but I don't know for sure what exactly happened. Anyway, that was the one single most freaky thing that happened to me. I know it sounds mundane, but I still get chills thinking about it. Anyway, after that, my dad decided to build a privacy fence around the backyard, and we got two dogs a little bit after that. The yard was pretty big, and my sister and I were both athletic. We would both put our headphones on and play in the yard while listening to music, kick a soccer ball, run laps around the yard, or play fetch with the dogs. Sometimes with others, and sometimes by ourselves. At night, I always thought I'd see some sort of cone-shaped head looking at me from over the fence, but if I did a double take to make sure I wasn't seeing things, the head would be gone. Other times, I'd be out in the yard by myself, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I would feel like I was being watched. This was always scarier to me than when I thought I saw things. I swear it was like I knew something was watching me. and it was overwhelming. I would stop what I was doing immediately and go inside. This happened all the time. Other times, I'd be shooting a basketball in the driveway or going for a jog through the neighborhood. It was a developing subdivision, not a house out in the woods by itself, and get the same freaky feeling. After we had got our licenses, I think I actually saw one while I was driving. We were with another friend who also lived outside of the city limits on the way to her house. Our friend was in the front seat, my sister was in the back. We were coming around this bend not too far away from our neighborhood, and all of a sudden my friend and I saw something super tall and brown on the side of the road. It was very tall, and the word I've always used to describe it is ancient. It looked like it was a really old man with a long beard with a distorted face. It was slender as well, not bulky. My friend and I saw it at the same time and both said, "What is that?" I guess my sister was on her phone or something because I remember that she asked what we saw, but we had already passed it by the time she was looking out the window. My friend and I both agreed that it was a man in a mask trying to scare people, but I don't think I really believed that. From then out, every time I drove past that spot, I'd try and see if there were any weird trees or something that maybe we could have thought was someone in a mask, but it just looked like a regular patch of woods after that. Another time, a different friend was playing with us outside as the sun was setting, and we were walking down this empty road that no houses had been built on yet. And to our left were some woods with miles and miles of ATV trails, when all of a sudden, he goes, "Run!" And we all sprinted back to the house. When we got back, he said he saw something, but he never told us what he saw. My sister and I are both grown now, and our parents sold that house and moved out of state while we were in college, so we have not been back in years. But after I did some research and started putting some pieces together, I asked my sister if she thought the house we grew up in was creepy, and she said it absolutely was. She would feel like she was being watched in the yard as well, and remembers seeing shadows moving in the woods, and said she'll never forget seeing something hiding behind the trash can that one time. She even Googled Bigfoot sightings in the town we grew up in and found an article about a rash of sightings that happened while we were in middle school. So anyway, we both believe that is why we are so creeped out by the woods outside of our house. There was probably a Bigfoot, or something else, and maybe more than one living out there. I've never connected all of these weird things until I started listening to some cryptid podcasts and stuff. Today's fourth experience. This didn't happen to me, but was told to me by my ex, her dad, who was there, and the guy it happened to, my ex-brother-in-law. None of them are prone to tall tales or embellishing facts. About 3 decades ago, so the 80s, in Appalachian Forest in central Pennsylvania, my brother-in-law was hunting whitetail during early archery season. He, as well as all of his family, are avid outdoorsmen, hunting, fishing, trapping, boating, camping, etc., in all seasons. This particular brother-in-law was close friends with a well-known outdoorsman from books, documentaries, and his own TV show for many years, and was as home in the wild as most folks are in their own living room. Late in the afternoon, he tagged a nice buck, quite some distance from the cabin, so he quickly gutted it and began the long drag back, hoping to get to camp before dark. As he described it, about 15 minutes into his trek, he began to be aware of something behind him. The further he went, the more certain he became that whatever it was following his trail. It probably locked onto the blood scent of the deer. He knew it was big due to the sounds he could hear in the brush and the occasional snort-like whoosh of air. He knew there were sightings of mountain lions in the area, and bear were fairly common, as well as bobcat and wild dog. But this just didn't seem to fit any of them. He quickened his pace, but not only did whatever it was behind him keep up, but it seemed to close the gap. Finally, he took a desperate gamble and threw the deer across his shoulders, and all but sprinted as best he could through the heavy brush and mountain laurel for the remaining quarter-mile to camp. After he had covered about half the distance behind him, he heard a blood-curdling howling scream from approximate area where he had shouldered the deer. Heart racing and adrenaline pumping, he covered the remaining distance to the cabin in record time, even leaping across a creek while still carrying the buck. All the while, he could hear growls and screams mingled in with loud pops and cracks, almost like gunshots. At camp, the others had already returned and were standing outside listening to the commotion when he came running in. They quickly hung the deer in the shed, locked it, and then locked themselves in the cabin. The sounds continued on and off for close to an hour at different points. Around the cabin, then, everything went quiet. Needless to say, nobody slept soundly that evening. The next morning, they went to investigate the area where the original sounds had begun, hoping to identify the sign and, from that, the animal responsible. The ground was too hard and rocky for any conclusive tracks, but what they did find, not more than 15 yards from where he had shouldered the deer, none of them can explain. In the middle of the thick stand of mountain laurel, an area about 20 feet by 20 feet, had been literally ripped apart. Laurel is a very tough, fibrous, bendy wood. It is almost impossible to break. These were twisted and snapped as though they were brittle twigs. There were no claw marks, no teeth marks, no antler or horn marks, no saw or hatchet marks. Very splintered, ripped, torn mountain laurel, some as thick as 2 inches. Whatever it was very big, very strong, and extremely mad. That area was torn apart in a fit of rage. Now you tell me what it was. For my money, I don't really know. Tonight's fifth encounter. Something happened to me and a buddy at the Rainbow Gathering in 2009 in Pennsylvania's Allegheny National Forest. It was right before the loads of people showed up and we were camped out, away from everyone. We were alongside a main trail that goes from the parking area and leads down a large hill to the main clearing. It was dusk, so light was fading fast, and we had a fire going. We're both sitting there, having a deep conversation about life and spirituality, when we decide to head down the trail to the clearing and find some food. At that moment, we were standing up, and some people who had been walking up the trail stopped and take a break about 30 yards below us. Anna says, "Hey, do you hear that?" I could clearly hear someone walking in the woods to our left. The thing is, there was nothing out that way, as we were quite a ways from the main clearing and facing the direction of all of the lights and people. The footsteps could be heard coming from our left and below us, heading straight for those people who were taking a break on the trail. I looked and saw nothing where my eyes said I should be seeing what was making those steps. There was nothing to be seen, and I could actually see where the steps were landing, leaves being kicked up. Whatever it was, walked up to those people on the trail who were talking to each other. None of them noticed a thing, but the steps definitely slowed down as it made a turn going past them, like it was checking them out. Then it came straight at me and my friend. Anna was fumbling with her keychain, trying to find a little flashlight she had. Whatever was making those steps came right up the other side of the fire pit without stopping. It approached slowly, and Anna pointed her light at it and said, "Hey!" As if in response, it took off up the hill right past me incredibly fast, kicking up leaves and dirt. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it. The entire time it sounded like an invisible child power walking, taking short, quick steps. And when it took off past me, it was still power walking, with small machine gun-like steps, if that makes any sense. There would have been no way for me to chase it. This thing was so fast we both took off running down the hill. this happened. I don't think it was a ghost because it didn't seem human. I always leaned towards the cryptid or paranormal. I had the distinct impression this creature didn't realize it was being noticed. All right, guys, that was tonight's second half. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And with that, I want to thank you all for all of your support. Please stay safe, and may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.